Hi, I'm Dr. Droll, and this is Dr. Ruiz, and we're here at Lipscomb today to talk about some of his prospective research that you might be able to be involved in if you come join our master's program. So, what is this research interest that you have that you're potentially looking into?
Yeah, one of the things that I found particularly interesting recently is the relationship between grit and goal orientation, particularly in college athletes.
So, what do you mean by grit?
So Angela Duckworth is kind of the guru of all things grit, and she defines it as this combination of perseverance and passion. When you're very passionate about something and you persevere to the end, then it's said that you are gritty. And it turns out that grit is the best possible predictor of future success. If you're thinking of life, if you read her book Grit, if you look at like success in college, a better predictor than grades or GPA or any of those things is grit, how gritty is a person.
So, I know this is kind of like comical, but is grit kind of like the tortoise and the hare? Like the tortoise that's just willing to always do it, keep taking a step, never quit, that type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to kind of think about it. The tortoise would certainly be the gritty one there, kind of slow and just going at it and not giving up. You assume that he's passionate there.
Yeah.
Certainly has the perseverance, but that's exactly what grit does and is.
Then how would you define goal orientation in this instance?
So it's this idea of how do you approach motivation, or how are you motivated in situations in which you're trying to achieve something. So imagine sports would be an achievement situation, school, work, any of those things where you're trying to achieve. It's an explanation of how are people motivated. And typically, kind of traditionally, it's thought of in one of two ways. You're either task-oriented or mastery-oriented, in which you do it. You're motivated because you want to improve, because you want to be good at it, because it brings you joy and contentment and all of those kind of things. Or you're ego-oriented, and you do it because you want to beat somebody else, or to set a record, or for means other than mastering the skill or the whatever it happens to be.
So is it possible to be high in both of those? Because as you were describing them, the first thing I thought of is like Kobe Bryant seems potentially high in both of those, because he's always like savagely trying to beat someone and get in their head, but at the same time, he was also the guy that was in the gym at 4 a.m. shooting for like 3 hours, like that type of thing.
Yeah, it turns out with goal orientation, kind of the old way to think about it was kind of on a kind of bipolar, where you were either task oriented and you really wanted to succeed because you loved it so much, or you were ego oriented and you did it because you want to beat somebody. Turns out it's not just kind of on a pole, because you can absolutely be high in both task and ego. In your Kobe example, you can absolutely want to beat other people, but also do it because you love it. In fact, the best way to be motivated is to be high in task and somewhat high in ego. The worst possible is not being motivated at all and being low in both of those things. But the second worst would be high on ego and low on task.
Is there any evidence that shows that being high in both those at the same time is like, I don't know a good word for it, but like unhealthy? Because I'm just thinking about the people that I can think of that are high in both those. I'm like, well, Michael Jordan, like Kobe Bryant, like all of these like world-class people that seem to like be missing the ability to like shut off and relax like other people.
Yeah, all things can be taken to an extreme, including motivation. So it comes down a lot to self-awareness and kind of being aware of why are you motivated, how are you motivated, and because it certainly can get out of control in either direction, either in that hyper motivation where you're willing to, we see this in athletics all the time, where people are willing to bend the rules and to break rules, performance enhancing drugs, or breaking rules in other ways. That's would be hyper motivation. Do anything to and that usually comes with ego orientation, by the way. The opposite, of course, would be no motivation at all, in which case you never get off the couch because you're not motivated. So there is a balance, and that's I can't tell you what that balance is. That's something you have to discover for yourself.
You can be unhealthy on both ends, so that's right.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So what specifically made you want to look at this in college athletes?
Well, when I work at a university, and so I'm particularly interested in kind of that age group. I spend a lot of my time with college athletes, and some of the professional work that I do is with college athletes, high school athletes. So that's a particularly interesting area for me. It's the one that I'm most trained in and most familiar with, and just the population that I enjoy working with the most. And especially when it comes to grit, there's been a lot more research in the world of education than there has in sports. There is some research out there on grit and goal orientation in college athletes. But it's still an emerging kind of subgenre or subfield where there's still a lot of potential research to be done.
So then I know if I was sitting there listening to this so far, my first thought would be like, well, can I develop these skills? So like, would you say someone could develop grit?
Yes, absolutely. According to Duckworth and in her book and in her very famous TED Talk, the best thing about grit is not only is it a great predictor of future success, but it's something that can be developed. So it's not stagnant. The goal orientation piece is a little bit more of kind of a reporting thing. This is what I am. I am task oriented. I am ego oriented, and you can become aware of it. You don't necessarily change it. That's a little bit more innate. That's an oversimplification, but it's a little bit more innate. Grit is very much something that you can build and become more gritty and become more passionate and have more persistence and perseverance. That can absolutely be developed.
So like, are you saying that there's an inherent drive towards goals based off of just like how you're genetically made up to a degree?
To a degree. A lot of it's, I mean, some of it's genetics. There would certainly be some environment and the people that you surround yourself with, the situations you find yourself. It can be very much situationally specific.
Okay. What are some ways that one could go about trying to develop grit? Or is it like so person to person that it's hard to put a...
It's a little bit of both. It's very personable. If I was working with somebody, I would not tell them this is what you do to develop grit. We would have a conversation and to see kind of what are they passionate about. What are they already persistent in? Can they name things in their lives that they find both passion and persistence in? And the opposite, what are you not passionate about and what are you not persistent in? And then when you know those things about yourself, that self-awareness piece, then you can start building and discovering what are the commonalities in these things, the things that I'm passionate about, and start directing your goals towards that.
So is there like multiple approaches in that regard? Like for some people, it might make sense to take something they're already passionate about and try to like strengthen that and bolster that, versus other people, they should look at areas where they're not. Is that kind of what you're saying, or is it?
It can be. I mean, you like what you like, right? So I will never be attracted to some things, no matter how persistent I may be. I will never be passionate about it. Of course, never say never. Those extremes are not always very helpful. But having just an honest conversation with yourself about, you know what, I'm particularly passionate about this. That may be a sport or an activity or a hobby or whatever. And once you identify that, then you start to think, okay, what is it about this activity that I am so drawn towards? And then do the same thing with the thing that you're not attracted to at all, and say, what is it about this that I do not find attractive at all? If this type of research sounds interesting to you, this is the kind of stuff that we're doing as part of kind of the human performance aspect of our graduate program. You know, if you look at our history of research, we do a lot of stuff in the labs where you're on treadmills or in the weight room or getting blood draws, really hardcore kind of real sciencey kind of stuff, and that's wonderful. But there's this whole other area in EXHP that looks at things like the psychology or the nutrition, those kind of things too, and we're also doing research in those areas. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested, Lipscomb's EXHP program might be the place for you.